Frugal, frugal, frugal. They live well below their means. The first time we interviewed a group of people worth at least 10 million decamillionaires, the session turned out differently than we had planned. We were contracted to study the wealthy by a large international trust company. Our client wanted us to study the needs of high net worth individuals. To make sure our decamillionaire respondents felt comfortable during the interview, we rented a posh penthouse on Manhattan's fashionable East Side. We also hired two gourmet food designers. They put together a menu of four pates and three kinds of caviar. To accompany this, the designers suggested a case of high quality 1970 Bordeaux plus a case of wonderful 1973 Cabernet Sauvignon. I don't even know what that is. Armed with what we thought would be the ideal menu, we enthusiastically awaited the arrival of our Deccan millionaire respondents. The first to arrive was someone we nicknamed Mr. Bud. 69 and first generation millionaire, Mr. Bud owned several valuable pieces of commercial real estate in the New York metropolitan area. He also owned two businesses. You would have never figured from his outward appearance that he was worth well over 10 million. His dress was what you might call dull normal, a well-worn suit and overcoat. Nevertheless, we wanted to make Mr. Bud feel that we fully understood the food and drink expectations of America's decamillionaires. So after we introduced ourselves, one of us asked, "Mr. Bud, may I pour you a glass of 1970 Bordeaux?" Mr. Bud looked at us with a puzzled expression on his face and then said, "I drink scotch and two kinds of beer, Free and Budweiser." We hit our shock as the true meaning of a decamillionaire's message dawned upon us. During the subsequent 2-hour interview, the 9 decamillionaire respondents shifted constantly in their chairs. Occasionally they glanced at the buffet, but not one touched the pate or drank our vintage wines. We knew they were hungry, but all they ate were the gourmet crackers. We hate to waste food. How did we dispose of our food and drink? No, we did not have to throw it away. The trust officers in the next room consumed most of it. Of course, the authors helped. It seems that most of us were gourmets. However, none of us was a decamillionaire. A foundation for building wealth. Today, we are much wiser about the lifestyles of the affluent. When we interview millionaires these days, we offer a spread that is more congruent with their way of life. We provide them with coffee, soft drinks, beer, scotch during evening sessions, and club sandwiches. Of course, we also pay them between $100 and $250 a piece. Occasionally, we offer additional incentives. Many respondents have picked a large and expensive teddy bear as one of their non-monetary rewards. They tell us they have a grandchild who would be thrilled to receive a big bear. It is unfortunate that some people judge others by their choice in food, beverages, suits, watches, motor vehicles, and such. To them, superior people have excellent tastes in consumer goods. But it's easier to purchase products that denote superiority than to actually superior in economic achievements. Allocating time and money in the pursuit of looking superior often has a predictable outcome: inferior economic achievements. What are 3 words that profile the affluent? Frugal, frugal, frugal. Webster defines frugal as behavior characterized by or reflecting economy in the use of resources. The opposite of frugal is wasteful. We define wasteful as a lifestyle marked by lavish spending and hyper-consumption. Being frugal is the cornerstone of wealth building. Yet far too often the big spenders are promoted and sensationalized by the popular press. We are constantly barraged with media hype about so-called millionaire athletes, for example. Yes, some of the members of this small population are millionaires. But if a highly skilled ball player makes $5 million a year, having $1 million in net worth is no big deal. According to our wealth equation, a $5 million earner who is 30 years of age should be worth $15 million or more. How many highly paid ball players have a level of wealth in this range? We believe only a tiny fraction. Why? Because most have a lavish lifestyle, and they can support such a lifestyle as long as they are earning a very high income. Technically, they may be millionaires, have a minimum net worth of $1 million or more, but they are typically low on the prodigious accumulator of wealth scale. How many households in America earn 5 million in 1 year? Fewer than 5,000 of the nearly 100 million households. That's about 1 in 20,000. Most millionaires never earn 1/10 of 5 million in a year. Most never become millionaires until they are 50 years of age or older. Most are frugal, and few could have ever supported a high consumption lifestyle and become millionaires in the same lifetime. But the lavish lifestyle sells TV time and newspapers. All too often, young people are indoctrinated with the belief that those who have money spend lavishly, and if you don't show it, you don't have it. Could you imagine the media hyping the frugal lifestyle of the typical American millionaire? What would the results be? Low TV ratings and lack of readership, because most people who build wealth in America are hardworking, thrifty, and not at all glamorous. Wealth is rarely gained through the lottery, with a home run, or in quiz show fashion, but these are the rare jackpots that the press sensationalizes. Many Americans, especially those in the underaccumulators of wealth category, know how to deal with increases in their realized income. They spend them. Their need for immediate gratification is great. To them, life is like a quiz show. Winners get quick cash and conspicuous gifts. Viewers of these shows have a lot of empathy for the contestants. Look at the top ratings such shows enjoy. People love to view the surrogate other winning motor vehicles, boats, appliances, and money. Why don't quiz shows offer tuition scholarships as prizes? Because most people want immediate gratification. They don't want to trade a prize of, say, a camper van for 8 years at night school, even though a college degree can translate into value equivalent to more than a dozen vans. The lifestyle of the typical American millionaire. Is a show about the typical American millionaire one the mass TV audience would enjoy? We doubt it. Why not? Let's take a look at why not. The camera zooms in on typical millionaire household Mr. Johnny Lucas. Like most millionaires, Johnny, 57, has been married to the same woman for most of his adult life. He holds an undergraduate degree from a local college. He is the owner of a small janitorial contracting firm that has thrived in the last few years. All of his workers now wear nicely tailored uniforms, including hats that bear his company logo. To his neighbors, Johnny and his family appear to be nondescript, middle-class folks, but Johnny has a net worth of more than $2 million. In fact, in terms of wealth, Johnny's household ranks in the top 10% of all households in his nice neighborhood. Nationwide, his household is in the top 2%. How will TV audience respond to the description of Johnny's wealth and images of Johnny on the screen? First, viewers will likely be confused because Johnny does not look like the millionaire most people envision. Second, they may be uncomfortable. Johnny's traditional family values and his lifestyle of hard work, discipline, sacrifice, thrift, and sound investment habits might threaten the audience. What happens when you tell the average American adult that he needs to reduce his spending in order to build wealth for the future? He may perceive this as a threat to the way of life. It is likely that only Johnny and his cohorts would tune in to such a program. It would certainly bolster their views about life. In spite of these concerns, let us assume that one of the major TV networks agrees to run at least a pilot program about the Johnnies of America. What will this program tell the viewing audience? Here is Johnny Lucas. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Lucas is a millionaire. I will ask Johnny some questions about his purchasing habits. These questions come from our audience. Custom made or off the rack? First, Johnny, Mr. JG from our audience wants to know, what's the most you ever spent for a suit of clothing? Johnny closes his eyes for a moment. Obviously, he is in deep thought. The audience is silent. It is expecting him to say somewhere between $1,000 and $6,000. But our research indicates that the audience expectations are wrong. We predict that our prototypical millionaire would say, the most I ever spent, including the suits I bought for myself and for my wife, June, and my sons, Buddy, Daryl, and my girls, Wileen and Ginger, the most I ever spent was $399. Boy, I remember that. It's the most I ever spent. It was for a very special occasion, our 25th wedding anniversary party. How will the audience respond to Johnny's statement? Probably with shock and disbelief. The audience's expectations are not congruent with the reality of most American millionaires. According to the most recent survey, The typical American millionaire reported that she never spent more than $399 for a suit of clothing for himself or for anyone else. Note the figures given in Table 2.1. 50% or more of the millionaires surveyed paid $399 or less for the most expensive suit they ever purchased. Only about 1 in 10 paid $1,000 or more. Only about 1 in 100 paid $2,800 or more. Conversely, about 1 in 4 millionaires paid $285 or less, and 1 in 10 paid $195 or less for his or her most expensive suit. These figures are for all millionaires in our survey. Keep in mind that almost 14% of those surveyed told us they inherited their wealth. What happens when we break our inheritors and self-made millionaires? Self-made millionaires spend significantly less for suits as well as the most other high-status items than do those who have inherited their wealth. The typical self-made millionaire paid about $360 for a suit, while the typical inheritor of wealth reported paying more than $600. How can the Johnnies of America get away with spending such modest amounts? Johnny does not need to wear expensive suits. He is not a successful attorney who must impress his clients, nor does he ever have to impress a large audience of stockholders at an annual meeting, the financial press, or investment bankers. Johnny does not have to dress the part of a high-powered CEO who must constantly address a highbrow board of directors. Johnny does, however, need to impress his staff of janitors. How? By never giving them the impression that he is making so much money he can afford to have a tailor fit him for a suit priced at a low to mid 4 figures. Most of the millionaires we have interviewed over the past 20 years have views similar to Johnny's. Then who purchases all those expensive suits? Our survey has revealed an interesting relationship. For every millionaire who owns a $1,000 suit, there are at least 6 owners who have annual incomes in the $50,000 to $200,000 range, but who are not millionaires. Their shopping habits certainly have something to do with the fact that they are not wealthy. Who are these people? Typically, they do not own their own business. They are more likely to be corporate middle managers, especially those who are part of a working couple, attorneys, sales and marketing professionals, and physicians. Why would anyone suggest that you spend more than the typical millionaire for a suit? In a recently published article, an owner of a very expensive suits touted that they were an excellent investment. Mr. Minard asks and answers the question of questions about investing in suits. Can custom-made suits be worth $2,000? Mine are. 14 years and 14 pounds later, they still look good. Believe it or not, I made an excellent investment. Mr. Minard tells his readers how he was initially guided to the custom tailor shops of London's Savile Road by 2 senior-level executives whom he regarded as having excellent tastes but were not frivolous in their buying habits. They explained that to buy bespoke is to enter into a unique and personal relationship with your clothes. What is the meaning of bespoke? In middle-class American, it means custom-made. Johnny Lucas never bought a custom-made suit. Does he have a unique and personal relationship with his all-wool, top-of-the-line JCPenney suit? Are you surprised to learn that some millionaires shop at Penny's? Perhaps even more surprising, about 30.4% of the respondents who are millionaires hold JCPenney credit cards. Penny's private brand Stafford executive suits were recently given top scores for durability, cut, and fit by the leading consumer publication. JCPenney now subject garments to tough tests for color matching, fabric shrinkage, and pilling. When it comes to quality control, Penny's is more demanding than any of the department stores. Keep in mind that moths, cigar ashes, and other hazards do not care how much you paid for your wool suit. They do not understand the full meaning of bespoke. They are not interested in the fact that a suit with the same label was also worn by Dickens, de Gaulle, and Churchill. Nor do they care if your suits ever generate dividends or capital gains, but they can certainly ruin your investment portfolio of suits. Then certainly footwear. Let us return to our proposed TV program. Mr. Lucas is still on stage. What type of shoes does Johnny Lucas purchase? The TV audience, if any are still tuned in, will again be surprised by his answer. Johnny, like most millionaires, does not buy high-priced footwear. About half the millionaires surveyed reported that they had never spent $140 or more for a pair of shoes. 1 in 4 had never spent more than $100. Only about 1 in 10 had spent over $300. If not millionaires, then who is keeping the high-priced shoe manufacturers and dealers in business? Certainly some millionaires purchase expensive shoes, but for every millionaire in the highest price paid category of over $300, there are at least 8 non-millionaires. But what does the popular press tell us? The press sensationalizes that very small proportion of Americans who purchase expensive shoes and related artifacts. Consider this news story about boxing promoter Don King, who spent 2 hours shopping for shoes in Atlanta. During that time, Mr. King purchased 110 pairs of shoes from one store for which he paid $64,100, tax included. His purchase topped the previous sales record for the store, held by Magic Johnson, who spent $35,000 during one visit. Mr. King's record purchase translates into an average of $582.73 per pair. How much did Mr. King pay for his most expensive pair? It was reported that a pair of alligator loafers cost him $850. Note that only 1% of millionaires in our survey paid $667 or more for a pair of shoes. Mr. King's purchase of alligator shoes is rare, even among millionaires. Nonetheless, the popular media enjoy touting abnormalities in buying behavior. As a consequence, our youth are told that buying expensive items is normal behavior for affluent people. They are led to believe that the wealthy have a high-consuming lifestyle. They learn that hyperspending is the main reward for becoming affluent in America. Why does Johnny Lucas get ignored while Mr. King receives headlines? Because Johnny's consumption habits are mundane. His rewards are more intangible than product-related financial independence, discipline, and being an excellent family provider, a fine husband, and a father of well-disciplined children. The last chance for Mr. Lucas. Is there any life remaining for our proposed TV program about America's typical millionaire? Can Johnny Lucas still rally and bring back the audience he lost? Johnny Lucas, the affluent business owner, is very punctual. He is never late for meetings and arrives at work each workday at 6:30 a.m. How does he do this? It must be his wristwatch. Could it be that Johnny wears an expensive watch? By now you have probably guessed the answer, and once again, the audience is disappointed. Fully one half of millionaires surveyed never in their lives spent more than $235 for a wristwatch. About 1 in 10 never paid more than $47, while about 1 in 4 spent $100 or less. Certainly, some millionaires purchase expensive watches, but they are in the minority. Even among millionaires, only 25% of those surveyed paid $1,125 or more. About 1 in 10 paid $3,800 or more. About 1 in 100 paid $15,000 or more. Johnny would, we are sure, apologize to the TV audience for his mundane tastes in clothing and jewelry, but we are sure that he would also define his position by reporting the following. I live in a fine home, but have no mortgage. All my children's college accounts were more than fully funded before they even began attending college. Unfortunately, Johnny's story, including his apology, will never get into syndication. So rare the Johnny Lucases. Why are so few people in America affluent? Even most households with six-figure annual incomes are not affluent. These people have a different orientation than does Johnny Lucas. They believe in spending tomorrow's cash today. They are debt-prone and are on earn and consume treadmills. Too many of them, those who do not display abundant material possessions, are not successful. To them, non-display oriented people like Johnny Lucas are their inferiors. Johnny Lucas is not likely to be held in high regard by many of his neighbors. On a social status scale, he is below average. But on what criteria? In his neighbors' eyes, Johnny has a low occupation status. He is an owner of a small business. What happens when he occasionally comes home in one of his janitorial vans? The van stays in his driveway until he leaves the next morning. What are his neighbors to think? They do not know that Johnny is financially independent. They do not give him points for being married and never divorced, fully funding his children's college tuition, and employing several dozen people, having integrity, being frugal, paying off his mortgage, and so forth. No, many of his neighbors would prefer that Johnny move out of the neighborhood. Why? Perhaps it's because he and his family don't look affluent, dress like the affluent, drive the vehicles of the affluent, or work in high status positions. Playing great defense. The affluent tend to answer yes to three questions we include in our survey. Were your parents very frugal? Are you frugal? Is your spouse more frugal than you? The last question is highly significant. Not only are the most prodigious accumulators of wealth frugal, their spouses tend to be even more frugal. Consider the typical affluent household. Nearly 95% of millionaire households are composed of married couples. In 70% of those households, the male contributes at least 80% of the income. Most of these men play great offense and in the game called income generation. Great offense in economic terms means that a household generates an income significantly higher than the norm, which is America in a realized income of approximately $33,000. Most of these households also play great defense. That is, they are frugal when it comes to spending for consumer goods and services. One frugal high-income producer within the married couple category, however, does not automatically translate into a high level of net worth. Something else must be present. A self-made millionaire stated it best when he told us, "I can't get my wife to spend any money." Most people will never become wealthy in one generation if they are married to people who are wasteful. A couple cannot accumulate wealth if one of the members is a hyper consumer. This is especially true when one or both are trying to build successful businesses. Few people can sustain profligate spending habits and simultaneously build wealth. Ode to his frugal wife. How did the wife of a millionaire respond when her husband gave her $8 million worth of stock in the company he recently took public? According to her husband of 31 years, she said, "I appreciate this, I really do." Then she smiled, never changing her position at the kitchen table, where she continued to cut out 25 and 30-cent off coupons from the week's supply of newspapers. Nothing is so important as to interrupt her Saturday morning chores. She just does today like she always has done, even when even when all we owned was a kitchen table. It's how come we're well off today. Made a lot of trade-offs, sacrifices early in our marriage. Why aren't you wealthy, you ask? Well, let's examine your lifestyle. Is it one of great offense? Are you in the $70,000, $100,000, $200,000 income category? Congratulations, you play wonderful offense. But how is it that you keep losing the game called wealth accumulation? Be honest with yourself. Could it be that you play terrible defense? Most high-income earners are in the same situation, but not most millionaires. Millionaires play both quality offense and quality defense. And quite often, their great defense helps them out-accumulate those who out-earn, have superior offenses. The foundation stone of wealth accumulation is defense, and this defense should be anchored by budgeting and planning. We have discovered that several occupational groups contain large numbers of budgeters and planners. Affluent auctioneers. Our latest survey of auctioneers found that more than 35% of them are millionaires. This percentage is slightly higher than the proportion of millionaire households living in America's finest urban and suburban neighborhoods. Auctioneers have been on our list of highly productive types since we conducted our first study of occupations in 1983, when they ranked 6th among those with realized annual incomes and more than $100,000. But their income alone was not what caught our attention. Given the same level of income, who accumulates more wealth, an auctioneer residing in small-town America or someone who lives in a high-status urban or suburban neighborhood? As you can guess, it is the typical auctioneer. Auctioneers are more frugal than their high-income producing counterparts in prestige areas. They have lower overhead both for households and business expenditures. To some extent, these data are explained by the lower cost of living and doing business in small towns. Yet, even when cost of living is taken into account, auctioneers are more prone to accumulate wealth. Consider the following. On average, millionaire auctioneers are about 50 years of age, 6 to 8 years younger than their urban suburban counterparts. The average millionaire auctioneer spends only 61% of the amount of urban suburban millionaires allocate for housing. Urban suburban millionaires are more than 3 times more likely than millionaire auctioneers to own luxury foreign automobiles. Auctioneers hold a higher proportion of their wealth in appreciating assets than do other high income producers, and they invest in categories in which they have expertise. Auctioneers have experience with bankruptcy. They are aware that consumer goods often generate few cents on the dollar. One auctioneer explained why she was so frugal. When I was quite young, I watched a woman crying, sitting on a chair in her front yard. All the while, bidders were walking away with everything she once owned. I'll never forget that woman. Let's ask the typical American self made millionaire about her defense. We'll refer to her as Miss Jane Rule. Miss Rule and her husband own a small business, an auctioneering appraisal company. They also invest in several of the categories of items they appraise. Mr. Rule is a visible manager of their business. He gets much of the credit for its success. After all, he speaks very well and very quickly. But it's actually Miss Rule who is the true force and leader of this enterprise. It's her planning, designing, budgeting, bill collecting, and marketing that made this auctioneering company successful. Why are Mr. and Mrs. Rule millionaires today? Because Mrs. Rule plays tremendous defense. She is responsible for budgeting and spending for both her household and their business. She is. Is anyone in your household responsible for budgeting? All too often, the answer is not really. All too often, people allow their income to define their budgets. When we tell our audience about the budgeting and planning habits of the affluent, someone always asks a predictable question. Why would someone who is a millionaire need to budget? Our answer is always the same. They became millionaires by budgeting and controlling expenses, and they maintain their affluent status the same way. Sometimes we are forced to add analogies to make our point. We ask, for example, have you ever noticed that those people whom you see jogging day after day, they are the ones who seem to not to need to jog, but that's why they are fit. Those who are wealthy work at staying financially fit, but those who are not financially fit do little to change their status. Most people want to be physically fit, and the majority know what is required to achieve this. But despite this knowledge, most people never become well conditioned physically. Why not? Because they don't have the discipline to just do it. They don't budget their time to just do it. It is like becoming wealthy in America. You want all right. You want to all right, but you play lousy financial defense. You don't have the discipline to control your spending. You don't take the time to budget or plan. Note that under accumulators of wealth spend 3 times as much time exercising per month as they do planning their investment strategies. Mrs. Rule is different. She's like most millionaires. She's disciplined. She takes time to plan and budget. This translates into wealth. Mrs. Rule's household income varies from year to year. It is typical and for auctioneers to have ups and downs in their cash flow. Often downturns in their nation's economy translate into increased demand for auctioneering services. Over the past 5 years, her annual income averaged around $90,000, but her net worth keeps increasing. Today, Mrs. Rule has a net worth of more than $2 million. In our survey, she answered yes to 4 questions about planning and budgeting. Do you wish to become affluent and stay affluent? Can you answer yes candidly and honestly to 4 simple questions? Question 1, does your household operate on an annual budget? Do you plan your consumption spending according to a variety of food, clothing, and shelter categories each year? Mrs. Rule, and so do most millionaires. In fact, in our latest national survey of millionaires, we found that for every 100 millionaires who don't budget, there are about 120 who do. We anticipate your question about those millionaires and who don't budget. How do they become millionaires? How do they control spending? They create an artificial economic environment of scarcity for themselves and other members of their household. More than half of the non-budgeters invest first and spend the balance of their income. Many call this the pay yourself first strategy. These people invest a minimum of 15% of their annual realized income before they pay the sellers of their food, clothes, homes, credit, and the like. What about those millionaires who don't budget or create an environment of relative scarcity? Some inherited all or most of their wealth. Another minority, accounting for fewer than 20% of millionaires, typically earn such high incomes that to some extent they can eat their income and still have a seven-figure net worth. In other words, their extraordinary good offense compensates for lack of defense. But so what if you earn 2 million a year and you have a net worth of 1 million? Technically, you're a millionaire, but spiritually, you're an underaccumulator of wealth. And it's likely that your millionaire status is temporary. These are the people you read about in the newspaper. The press loves to tout freaks of both nature and economics. Will the popular press ever do a story on Mrs. Rule? It's unlikely. Who wants to read about Mrs. Rule's $140,000 home or her 4-year-old Detroit metal sedan? Who wants to see her sitting at the kitchen table 3 nights in a row putting together her family's annual budget? Is there anything exciting about computing and accounting for each dollar spent last year? Would you be thrilled to watch Mrs. Rule compute and allocate future dollars of income into dozens of consumption categories? How long could you stand to watch her carefully complete her annual allocations calendar? Well, it's not fun for Miss Rule either, but in Miss Rule's mind, there are worse things, such as never being able to retire and never being financially independent. It's much easier to budget if you visualize the long-term benefits of this task.